Welcome to the Black Appalachian Coalition's podcast entitled Blac Re-Membering, where we will bring to you the heavy and the hope across the Ohio River Valley. We want to remember who we are, where we've come from. We want to speak to the oral history of what we've done, what we've achieved. We want to speak to the ills that we have experienced while also finding solutions to those problems, those issues. We want to deal with the narrative that has kept us deeply rooted in despair. Now we want to punch through that narrative and stand up and say, we are remembering our Black past, and we are rooted, and we are here to stay. Welcome to Blac Re-Membering. We hope that you find your place, your space, and your voice in this podcast.
Welcome to Blac Re-Membering podcast. I am your host, and I am the narrative organizer, Tanya Whitfield. And this is my brother from another mother, but we got the same daddy. Hello, girl. If you know what that means. If not, I'll tell you later. And so Tyler Offerman, even though he always says he's not my boss, but I do call him my boss because I answer to him, even though he would never say that I do, but it's true. He works with KEJC, which is Kentucky Equal Justice Center. He also is with KFAN, which is Kentucky Food Action Network. And I'm also going to let him talk a little bit about himself before we get into the questions.
Well, thanks, Tanya. As always, it's a delight to see you and be in your company. As you said, my name is Tyler Offerman. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the manager of policy initiatives at the Kentucky Equal Justice Center. And KEJC is people have called us the rogue law firm of the poor before, and I really like that title. Technically, we are a nonprofit law firm that serves mostly low-income and indigent and marginalized clients across Kentucky. We work a lot in food, health, immigration, housing, and yeah. But besides that, I'm also a father of two. I live and love in Lexington, Kentucky. I've lived here since 2013. Me and my now wife moved up from Florida. I was actually born and raised in Fort Myers, Florida, and I had never been to Kentucky before we moved here. But I've called Kentucky home ever since, and maybe in 20 or 30 years, Kentuckians will consider me a local, but we'll see.
You are so awesome. So the first question is, tell me a little bit about yourself and your community. So, and since you have two communities, even though I know you haven't been to Florida in a little bit, but if you want to kind of share a little bit about your upbringing, and I know there's definitely a difference between Florida and Kentucky. So you can talk about both situations.
Yeah, it's a little colder here than back home. But yeah, well, so I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida, which is South Florida. It's on the Gulf Coast. And I grew up as the child of a working class father who did construction his whole life. He still does. And my mom, they got divorced when I was real young, about two. She, for a long time, as long as I was alive, struggled with mental health issues as well as alcoholism. And she died when I was 12 from cervical cancer. And, for my whole life, it was sort of split between two worlds. There was, my dad, he bought a piece of property when he graduated from high school. He built our house. He did the same job, still lives in that house. He is a very constant person. And I sometimes say that he's the human equivalent of Shrek. He's barefoot. He usually doesn't have a shirt on. He burps real loud. And
I
you know,
love it.
and he is a hardworking person. He taught me my work ethic, and he always loved nature. And we grew up actually with a house full of animals. And when I say animals, I mean the snake room, as well as tortoises, dogs. We had crocodiles for a while. We once had a monkey, which I don't really know where that one came from. I think a friend of his got, I don't know how he got it, but we had a monkey at one point. So, a bit of a zoo, metaphorically and literally. But, my dad, again, he was always very dependable. He was loving, he was caring, he was hardworking, and he was a provider. My mom was, beautifully artistic, and she just struggled. She had a lot of issues. She had a lot of abusive partners, and we generally lived in pretty deep poverty. I remember, I spent most of the year with my dad, but a good chunk of the years with my mom until she became just too unstable, for us to really stay with her for too long. But, I remember eating bacon bits out of unmarked cans from the food bank and going to the store and buying stuff with WIC. And so, I guess to me, it's like, so I've got physical communities, right? I've got a community back in Florida, community here, but I always think about like, well, who are my people? And to me, like my people are poor and marginalized folk. That's who I grew up with. That's how I grew up. Those are the people and the cultures that I identify with. And, we've talked before. You've always said, don't call me low income. There's nothing low about me. There is at least to me, like a certain kind of community that you can only find, like in trailer parks and rundown, quote unquote, rundown communities where it's like, yeah, everyone's struggling, but people watch out for each other. So those are my people. And yeah, back home, I grew up barefoot out in the swamp, catching alligators, having a good old time. And I met my wife actually doing climate justice organizing. We were both in college. She was in Miami and I was in Fort Myers. We met and, I fell head over heels and told her I'd follow her anywhere. And she was born in Kentucky outside of Louisville.
Mhm.
And then her family moved to Florida.
Okay.
She went to school down there. So we moved back up. She's still got aunts and cousins and a bunch of folks out in like St. Matthews and south of Louisville, around Bardstown and stuff. So yeah, I've got my neighbors in Lexington. I've got my family and friends back in Florida, and then I've got my organizing community, the people I cause good trouble with.
I love that. I love Senator John Lewis for saying that, causing good trouble. I think we do really well together, and that's why I call you my brother. Blood couldn't make us any closer, I promise. I still remember when we was talking about something, and I was just saying some things, and even at that time, it didn't seem like I was nervous, but I was, you know. And then you was like, "I'm picking up what you putting down," and I'm like, "Does he know how to say that? What? He said it! Oh my god!" Like I really felt that. And of course, in the meeting, I couldn't do all that, but in my spirit, I was over here like, and I remember telling my family, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's the white boy we need," and yeah, that's a good white boy right there. Because you just are, and even when I'm in other circles, I just hear that, like, and of course, like if we're more buttoned up, they're like, "Yeah, he's good," but we know what they're really saying. Like we're like, "Yeah," and that's why it's like you're just so amazing, like for real. And you're just being you, you know what I'm saying? You're just being your authentic self. And that's just such a beautiful thing. So like you kind of answered like three of my questions, which was good because like the first question is just knowing about you. The second question was like community wise, and you kind of like touched on that, especially with Florida, and then you talked about Kentucky and your organizing people because you got all kind of people, like you got a whole situation going on. But that just shows how like you are very versatile with people and getting to know others, and you do well in any space. I feel like I could trust you in any space. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like even if I wasn't there, and somebody said something about me And most of the time it's probably good, but even if it wasn't, they'd be looking like, that's her bro. We gonna be nice. Because you know how to like, that's why I'm kind of envious of you, because you could like cuss somebody out without cussing them out. And you do it very articulating, and you're very like bam about it. And I'm just like, I wouldn't know how to do that one day. Like I love it. So the fourth question is, what environmental things have you noticed? And this one, of course, because you're from two different places, and I definitely know there is some differences. I don't know if there's as many like factories and stuff up in Florida versus down here, because we kind of live close in the same area. But I would just love to hear that answer, especially you was like wrestling what, alligators and all that type stuff. Not that you were wrestling them, but you know what I'm saying.
Just for fun. Well, it's interesting. When Kara and I met, we were doing climate and environmental organizing, and I did that for a long time. First couple years, I came to Kentucky as well. And Kentucky and Florida actually have some maybe more similarities than you would think, especially in the topography. In Kentucky, we have a karst topography, which means a mix of sandstone and limestone. And as the water wears away, it creates openings. And that's why we have so many caves in Kentucky, because of our karst topography. Mammoth Cave is the longest cave system in the world as far as we know. Florida also has a karst topography, and Florida, if you've ever been to like a natural spring down there, there's a whole bunch. And it's because Florida also has an immense amount of caves and caverns, but they're all underwater because Florida is, at most a couple 100 feet above sea level at its highest point. Most of the state is within a couple dozen feet of sea level. So Florida and Kentucky actually have almost the identical land. One just happens to be a couple 1,000 feet above sea level and have mountains, and the other is very flat and near the ocean. So, that was an interesting realization when I moved here. And another similarity is that there's actually a lot of mining in both states. So in Florida, just north of where I grew up, there's a couple counties, and I don't know the statistics anymore, but it's like the vast majority of the phosphate that goes into fertilizer comes out of this like 3 or 4 counties in Central Florida. Massive mining operations. There's these huge open pit mines where they mine the phosphate. And there's a byproduct called phosphogypsum. And phosphogypsum is this sort of gray, slurry material that's slightly radioactive because it's like all the waste from the mining. And they don't really know what to do with it, so they just stick it in these like giant quarries that they build. And when I moved here, the type of environmental organizing I was doing was around coal mining and mountaintop removal. So in eastern Kentucky, they have huge open pit mines where they mine the coal. The byproduct from the coal mining is called slurry, and it's this gray, hazardous, slightly radioactive material that they don't know what to do with. So they stick it in these giant quarries. And in both communities, they are these vast pools of death, basically, where, if the quarry fails,
Mhm.
it'll spill out. The difference in Florida is that if it spills out, it's a flat surface. So it's like it's not good. But in Eastern Kentucky, if one of those slurry quarries breaks, it's going to go down the mountain and it's going to bury whatever town.
Mhm.
There's actually
It's right there.
I don't know
Mm.
if they've moved it yet. I don't. There was an elementary school under one of these quarry impoundments in Eastern Kentucky, a couple 100 feet away from one. Very unstable thing. And at any time, it could have broken and just buried all the kids in the elementary school. So, you know, for me, environmental justice has always been an important issue. And Florida and Kentucky might seem very opposite type, one might imagine that, but there's actually more similarities than one might think. And Yeah, I don't know. Personally, Lexington, you know, we have decent air quality. We've got pretty decent water infrastructure. It's fascinating to me that the thing that we get to smell on like, quote unquote bad days is the Jif factory. It just kind of smells like a Reese's cup outside. And my wife, she does work in environmental justice still, and she works with a lot of the folks in the West End in Louisville, around Rubbertown, around the air quality out there. And, whereas we have a Jif factory, like they've got the Firestone factory and the DuPont factory. And, when they have bad days, it's like you can't go outside. Like it's deeply unsafe for you to even open your window. So, yeah, I don't know. It's one of the things that I've learned after living in different places and doing organizing, community organizing with different folks in different places. Like, yeah, there's definitely differences. And, we need to be responsive to not just the material differences, but the cultural differences. But there's actually a whole lot that we have in common. And there's a lot of struggles against, unjust and oppressive forces that, the folks in Central Florida are dealing with the same stuff that the folks in Eastern Kentucky are. It just looks different. And, unfortunately, a lot of times those struggles are not connected. And, there's forces that try to keep us separated. Right. We've talked before, like you are dark skinned, I am light skinned. Racism is alive and well in this country. And for the most part, whether it's within the Black community or the white community, there is this, you shouldn't hang out with them. Like you shouldn't be with those people that are different. And, I would venture to say that in the Black community, it's like I know a lot of white people and a lot of them are pretty fucked up. And I think there's a lot of deeply problematic and violent and traumatic things that white folks inflict upon Black and brown people. And like we have to work together across racial lines to address the issues. So it's like, how do we acknowledge those differences and respect them while also just like working in solidarity across lines of class, across lines of race? So yeah, that's what I try and do. And yeah, I don't know. Lexington's interesting. Like we have industry. It's a growing city. It's one of the fastest growing in the nation. But a lot of the factories that produce the goods or the energy or the pollution that we utilize here, like we don't have to deal with. Like we send it to a different community, you know? So it's yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't, you tell me, Tanya, but for the most part, like, I think Lexington's a lovely little city to live in, and it's got its problems, like 100%. But, I don't know. Have you ever heard the term fence line community?
Mm-mm.
So, like frontline community is a term that's used sometimes, but a fence line community, at least specifically with an environmental justice framework, is the community that lives on the fence line, like to the power plant. Or the community that lives on the fence
Oh.
line to the, X factory. And like we don't have that many fence line communities in Lexington. Again, because we ship our waste out, we get a lot of our energy from power plants that aren't located in the city. So I don't know. It's interesting. And I guess this goes back to my point. It's like if you live in Lexington and you keep your head down and you don't really connect with the people in like other communities and connect our struggles to their struggles, you might have sort of a rose-colored view of the city. But once you
Mhm.
realize that like there's a community that's getting ash rained on it from a power plant that we get energy from, but we don't have to look at it.
As you said that, it made me think of it's funny. I can think of movies all the time, but I'm pretty sure you saw Bruce Almighty.
Yeah, of course. Jim Carrey,
And
classic.
yeah, and right? And so, he had did that cool thing for his woman by bringing the moon closer and all that type of stuff. But then it affected another country, and it was like it's the solar issue, or something like that they said, and there was like flooding, and there was like this, and there was like that, and it just made me think of that, because it's like, okay, he thought he was doing this cool thing for her, and she's probably like, oh, it's so sweet, and it was a cool part of the movie, but then that part that happened after was like, see, that's why when you do stuff, you thinking you doing something cool, but then there's like this bad side of it too. You know what I'm saying? And so that kind of made me think of like when you were saying about, yeah, like they get something, and we don't have to look at it, but then it affects both of us. So like that just made me think of that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting analogy of sorts, right? Because in Bruce Almighty, Jim Carrey, or I guess he was playing God at that moment, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like he didn't know that that was going to happen. He was, naive to the impact of it, which, one of the lessons that I learned early in organizing was like, it doesn't matter what your intention was, it matters what your impact is. And
Ooh.
you have to be accountable to the impact of your actions, regardless of your intentions. And, I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of well-meaning, quote unquote, well-meaning white people need to hear that a lot more often. Oh, I didn't mean for that to come across that way or to do that. I was like, well, it doesn't really matter what you meant to do. But, especially for corporations, utilities, factories, like these people know what they're doing. Like they know the impact. And yeah, I don't know. Like as a kid, I was always, I guess, a hellraiser. I rarely listened when people told me I needed to do something. In fact, when they said, you have to do this, especially if it's the because I told you so thing, I was just like, that seems pretty paper thin there, bub. Like, I'm not going to do that.
I
And
can't see that. I can't even see that.
yes, I've been told I have a problem with authority. But, to me, it's like, yeah, I don't know. I just stand by that. Like, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. It matters what your impact is. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's our job to hold people accountable to that. And, sometimes the most strategic way is to do that gently. And sometimes the most strategic way is to just do it because I don't care what your excuses are. We know full well that the burning of fossil fuels or, the byproducts from certain manufacturing practices are toxic and deadly and are killing our people. And I just don't have time for your bullshit is the is the sort of motto I take. And, if you're gonna get things done, you gotta do it smart. So, to your earlier point, like, yeah, I can put on a suit. I can use the lingo of, the owner class, but it's, I guess that's one of the things. It's like, it's a skill you have to develop if you want to get things done. Because, like it or not, issues of race, class, gender, and sexual orientation close people's minds off to other people. And in order to get people to hear you and to trust you and to find humanity in your experience, you have to get past that somehow. So for me, it's like, look, I've got no problem being the first one to take that step. Like I'll self-deprecate, I can connect with my poor roots, I can put on a tie and, you know, put on the show. But I never lose myself in that. Like I know who I am. And that's really important in this work. Like I'm a lobbyist. Meet with legislators all the time, state and federal. Like last year I had to work with, the lobbyists from Walmart and Toyota and Amazon, who I generally despise, but we had to work together because we had a bad bill to stop. But you have to maintain integrity. And some people, they either choose to compromise their values and integrity for the pursuit of power or for winning. And others, it's just sort of a slow, wearing down over time. So, if I ever feel that happening, I'll get out. But I feel like sometimes people say the word code switching in almost a derogatory word, but I'm like, look, it's how poor people have survived our entire lives. Like you have to use the lingo of your overbearers in order
Mhm.
to survive. But to me, I always say that, like, I mean, poor folk have the best grasp on that, right? Like, because again, it's a part of survival. So, yeah, it's like I had to learn what rich people wanted in order to survive as a poor person. So I know more about like that culture than a rich person would know about poor folk and the culture of our people. So in a lot of ways, it's like it's easier for us to have a foot in both worlds. Whereas, you put someone who grew up in a $1 million mansion in a trailer park and tell them to start building trust, like, good luck. That's probably not going to go very well.
Exactly. Unless you're that type of person that understands and doesn't forget, because I have worked everywhere down here, and I'm not exaggerating. I've met all different levels of people, titles, and like horse people. Like, even though a lot of them say that's old money, so it's like they're really stingy, because I guess that's the nice way to say they're stingy, because it's old money. I really think it depends not just on the person, but I think the interaction, because the best tips I've ever gotten was from working class people. Those have always been the best tips. Now, horse people, that's a whole nother lingo. Like, I still remember this group. They was at King. No, it wasn't Kingland. It was Horse Park. It was the Horse Park, and they just loved me. They ate me up. They thought I was hilarious. I mean, anything I said, it was just like funny. At first, I just thought they were playing, but no, they were genuine, and I felt that. And I mean, they tipped me very well. I mean, to the point I had to count it like 4 times, maybe even 40 times, because I just couldn't believe how real this money was in my hand. And it's just like when I look at that, and then I look at people that like, ooh, you're not supposed to talk to because like they're this name or this one name. Like, I still keep forgetting who this gentleman is. He's a newer one now, but I remember we was at the event in March, that big event at the Kroger Field Stadium, that big food event. I can't think of the name, but he's like the main guy. He's kind of like, because he's
Oh, the
over
local food summit.
yes. So he's like over the money and the all that kind of stuff. So I remember running into him, and me being me, I was like, "Hey, can we take a picture?" And we was having a good conversation, whatever, whatever. And I know people was looking like, does she not know who he is? Like, like I shouldn't be talking to him like that. And we had a good conversation, because that's me. That's who I am. And he just was like, I just love your realness. I'm like, well, thank you, baby. And you real too. And he had a cool, he had his collar shirt on, but he had jeans on. He's like, because I like to be comfortable. I'm like, right? Because you can still look, professional and still have your flavor. He's like, I am for that. And I know people were looking like, how did she get him to talk like that? I didn't get him to do anything. I just felt like I made him comfortable, and I don't even think I made him comfortable necessarily. I just think it was just a good flow. And though that event I think is so amazing, because it's all different people, and we're really not different, because a lot of us have been in this work for a long time. We believe in what we're doing. And so when you're meeting like the quote unquote powers that be, like, they want to understand where we're coming from. Like, they're involved in that. They want to see, they want to hear you being honest. Of course in a respectful way, but they want to hear that. And I have no problem doing that, because that's just me. I have that skill. But I feel like when people hear me, they're like, no, she's spot on, and they're picking up what I'm putting down. They really are. And it's like, I don't have to, I used to be nervous about that. Always worried, like, they're gonna kick me out. Ooh, I'm gonna get into so much trouble. Let me go find Tyler. He might help me out. Like I used to worry about that all the time, and people are like, girl, if I really felt like you was offending me, I promise I would tell you. You ain't gotta worry about it. And and that's why I say it's like, sometimes I think it's me that worries too much. Not that the worry isn't valid sometimes, because in certain spaces or certain circles, but sometimes I do it to myself. And I feel like other people do it to themselves because they want to get that person first before that person gets them. And so, another movie reference. It was so funny. So, Medea and Phil, why was I about to say Phil Collins? Lord Jesus, it's not Phil Collins, Dr. Phil. And he was like, he said, but you talking about getting a person that never even got you in the first place. And then Medea was like, well, if this person got me, then I'm gonna get them and then I'm gonna get the Glock. And then he's like, well, you can't be getting the Glock when you hadn't been got. And I'm over here like, oh my gosh, that is so true. Like you already trying to like get this person and they ain't even messing with you like that. You know what I'm saying? Like they ain't even, and then because you did that, now they feel like they got to get in defense mode. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like they feel like, at first we was cool. Now you done said too much, and now I have to, whatever. Like now you done put me in that position. You know what I'm saying? Even though you still have control over like if it bothers you or not, but at the same time, like, hey, you did too much, bruh. You know what I'm saying? What you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, that definitely resonates with me. Having grown up, in and around poverty and having a problem with authority, I often find myself just being very angry, and I think you might call it class rage, but when I meet someone with wealth or power, part of me, this like deep part from my childhood just doesn't like them. There's that like automatic sort of vitriol. And it's not helpful. It's not productive. It comes from past trauma, but everybody lives at the intersection of privilege and oppression. Every single one of us. Because of that, even the most powerful people have trauma in their lives. Maybe we can't see it, maybe we don't know about it. So, one of the things that, I have learned and continue to try to sit into is that, there's a lot of rich and powerful people who could be allies to us in our work to fight environmental injustices and poverty. And by me just automatically not liking them because of something that they couldn't control, that's not helpful. That's not strategic. And, everybody deserves humanity. This is the way that I approach people. It's like everyone deserves humanity, and that's irrevocable, right? No matter how terrible you are, you deserve humanity. I also automatically extend respect to all people, but that is something that you can lose. So it's like you will always get, at least from me, I will see the humanity in you, but your choices dictate if I will maintain respect for you or not. And I remember my grandfather, he was a real hard ass. He used to say, I'll never shake the hand of someone that I don't respect because a handshake is a sign of an agreement. And I will never enter into an agreement with someone that I don't have respect for. And I did once use that and felt very, someone went to go shake my hand and I said that. I was like, I only shake the hand of people I respect. And then I left. And it was like an ice cold burn. I don't know if I've ever, levied such an ice cold burn as that. So, I can't say that I like use it all the time like my grandfather did. But, I think about that. It is like we we must all extend humanity to each other because once we no longer see each other as humans, we facilitate the conditions of oppression and marginalization and othering and discriminating.
Hmm.
And if I expect that for me, I must expect it. Others must, get that for me as well. But yeah, I mean, look, if you're doing shitty things, if you're hurting people, if you're destroying communities, like I'll see the humanity in you, but I will fight you tooth and nail, and I will make your life miserable, and we will crush you because we are more powerful than you when we organize together.
So the last question that I have officially is, so what are your hopes? And when I say hopes, like not just for yourself and your family and your community, but like as a community as a whole, for like now, present, and the future, like, how would you articulate that? Because I know that could be very broad.
yeah, I mean, liberation is the word that comes to mind. There's so much that's wrong. There's so much that's wrong with society, with the way that we treat people here and, Kentucky, in this country, in this world. The US is a source of immeasurable pain and suffering, besides the military presence that we have in other countries, the corporations that are founded here, prey upon the people of the world in any number of ways. And yeah, I don't know, it's a lot to sit with. I view this place, this country as, my home. Like I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes my friends joke about moving to New Zealand and Canada. I'm like, y'all are a bunch of softies. Like, why don't you just stay and fight? Come on. But yeah, I don't know. It's like most of the problems that I am concerned with solving are too large and complicated to be solved in my lifetime. So I mean, my view on it is like, look, as long as I'm in the center of the fight, then, I'll be living a good life. And for me, in my community, I do a lot of state and federal advocacy. And because of that, I'm actually not as connected to the Lexington organizing scene, activist scene. And my wife and I were actually talking recently about how we would like to get a little bit more involved, to go to city council meetings and just remember that, as we're fighting the fight, it's also important to just like our neighbors are our most immediate community. And, if we're thinking about climate catastrophes and, the hateful immigration policies that are coming up, collapse of food systems, like we need to make sure that we know our neighbors, that we trust our neighbors, or that we know which neighbors not to trust. I would venture to guess there's not actually that many, but, so yeah, for the rest of my life, as long as I am fighting the good fight and building deep, authentic relationships with the people immediately around me and that I work with, like I don't know. I don't really think there's much else to strive for besides, trying to be a decent father and an okay husband.
You're adorable. He said a good father and an okay husband. I love that. And it's just to be saying it or, whatever. You're like, just being genuine. And I think that's why we click so well. I always felt that. Even when I first met you, I was like, this is gonna be my brother. Like I really believe that and I still believe it to this day. And I still remember the first time you asked me if I wanted to be interviewed. I remember that because I was thinking in my head, duh, like, hello, it's me. And I'm just honored to be in your face because I'm able and I have really some people in my life. And even if we weren't in each other's lives, we would still fare very well. But for us to be in each other's lives and like you're like my big brother. You know what I'm saying? You you have just this way about you. Like seriously, you have this and I don't even know how to percolate what that is. I don't even know how to articulate what that is. But it's just you and you're just real. And that's why I have immense respect for you. Like it's through the roof because you're just you. And that's how my dad was. He was like, "What? I'm just me." Like I still remember saying to him, this is a little bit before he passed, and he was like, "I taught you all that." And it was only a few little things. Like it wasn't even the big stuff. And he's like, "For real?" And I don't think he was being modest or anything like that. I just think he didn't really see it like that. Like he didn't, because as parents, we want our children to be the best that they can be, right? We want them to excel and be better than us, and our grandkids to be better than us, because it's not about quote unquote better, but having just more. And whatever your more is, as long as you're doing it in like not even a successful way necessarily, but in a way of, okay, I'm helping people, I'm taking care of people, doing the things that I need to do, and trying not to make too many enemies, because sometimes, that's going to happen, right? People are going to feel some type of way about you. People are going to, say this about you, say that about you. But, it's not what people call you, it's what you answer to. I truly believe that. And I'm just grateful for you, not just as a colleague, but as a friend, as a brother, as somebody that I really trust. Like, I really trust you. I really trust that you're going to always keep it 100 with me, and you're always going to be real. And that is such a great gift to give anyone, because you do it in such a way of just honesty, but still love. There is this beauty about you, in a very manly way. I feel like men can be beautiful too, but I always
Oh,
say manly
well,
because, you know,
any man that gets insecure from being called beautiful is maybe not as much of a man as they think.
you know. So I just say that in general. I knew you could roll with what I'm saying, but I'm just grateful for you. You know what I'm saying? Because I believe anybody that you meet, like, there is a purpose for that. Even if it's a bad thing. Even if these people were mean to you or whatever have you, there was still a purpose for it. I don't want to say that, oh, that meant to happen and all that kind of stuff, but I believe that there's a purpose for it. And not to get religious, but I will, because in Romans 8:28 it says, he will work everything for my good. That's what it says. And I believe that. I truly believe that, because I think about when we first met and look at where I'm at now. I'm doing podcasts. I'm on these different boards and advisory things, and like, people are really trusting what I stand for. So if you know me as long as you have, what would you say to people, like, not really like kind of describe me, but like kind of how I was when you first met me to now? Well, how would you percolate that?
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, you are the same person I met all those years ago, still true to yourself. You've always been, disarming and, flamboyant and funny and, always trying to find the joy or the laugh in a situation. And, but I would say the most striking thing is I think you stand more fully in acknowledging your power than when we first met. I remember you,
Mhm.
I'd say, some insecurities about, do I deserve to be here? Being self-deprecating much more. I don't want to say self-insulting, but I think you were uncomfortable. You weren't sure. And I think, over the years, yeah, I guess it's simultaneously, right? Like it's less new, it's less intimidating, but also, I don't know, it just feels like you respect yourself and the fact that you can do these things. You deserve to be here, you belong here, and there's nobody that's going to tell you otherwise. I think that last part maybe has been there the whole time, but I think like me, maybe you've got a problem with authority, which is a good sign of an organizer. Yeah, I deeply appreciate your friendship, also your camaraderie over the years. We've worked on a lot of things together, but we've also, just sat with each other through hard times. And yeah, I'm super pumped for where you're gonna go, what you're gonna do. I know it'll always be good. And yeah, I appreciate you bringing me on this podcast. I hope all the listeners have enjoyed our ruminations and percolations and have me back sometime.
You are just so sweet. Like, seriously, I'm trying not to cry. because I just feel just the blessing of this, honestly and sincerely. And everybody that hears this that is like, okay, they might think, how are they so close? Because they're looking at me being me, you being you, but we're not really that different. I mean, we look different, and that's fine, but
You are much
actually,
prettier than me, that's true.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate it, appreciate it. But I feel like, when I talk to you, I just feel like I've known you my whole life. You know what I'm saying? And it's so funny to me because you're from Florida, right? And on my mom's side, it's like they live almost the whole family lives in Florida. Like it's just Floridaville. And and it's also funny because I always be like, why people keep listening to Florida? Like, Florida ain't the end all be all. You know what I'm saying? Like, they be getting on my nerves, these people from Florida. And, but you the cool Floridian, so to speak. And I'm over here like, that is so hilarious how that works, how that transpires. But I just appreciate your time, and not just for this podcast, because yeah, we will definitely percolate again for sure, because people are going to want this. I mean, we might even break the internet with this, because like I just feel like this is proof, and this shows that even when you think people are different, we really ain't that different. I mean, I feel like we have way more in common than most people would think. And that's why I tell people, even about my mom, when you get past that my mom's white, you will see that I really look like my mom too. And of course I don't look like her, but I look like her. And we have so many dynamics. Like, this is another movie reference. So this one, it was like Escape to Witch Mountain. And so this was the one, like, before they knew they were siblings, and like they got the same food. They had everything organized the same way. They moved the same way. They sneezed the same way. And I'm over here like, I do a lot of that like my mom. Like, I'm so much like my mom. It's crazy because I'm a daddy's girl through and through. And my daddy really loved my mom. Like, you could see that. You could see the love in his eyes. And I'm like, that's what I want. You know what I'm saying? I want to have a man like that just looks at me and just it's like, that's my queen. That's why when you said like about Kara, I will follow her anywhere. I'm like, oh my gosh, she is like the cutest thing. Oh my gosh. But to end this, I want to say thank you for not only sharing your time, sharing your space, but to trust me with having you on here and just being who you are. Because I feel like this is just a regular conversation. We're just, recording it and putting it out because I feel like people need to hear this. People need to hear that we're way more alike than we are different. I've said this for years, even before podcasts. We really are. But if you are trying to only look for the stuff that makes us different, then that's all you're going to focus on. And then you're going to miss out on greatness. You're going to miss out on that beautiful diamond in the rough. And you have helped me so much because I felt like it was always in me. But when you're around the right people, when you find your people, so to speak, it's such a amazing thing. That's why with even this event tonight, I've had so many people bless me in so many different ways, and I'm over here like, I knew that could happen, but like knowing something can happen and when it actually happens, it's like two very different situations. Cause you're like, oh my gosh, like I kind of knew that, but now I'm like in this, oh my gosh, like, no, they really trust me. Like, no, like, it's serious now. Like, this is real. Like, I'm in the game. Like, I'm not on the bench no more. And it's like, now I have to just always believe that. Like, even before it happens, it's just believing, because regardless of, what the percolation is and all that type of stuff, it's like, no, I really just need to believe in myself and believe that people do see me, and people do hear me, and they are listening, and that they see like, no, she's for real. Like, this girl ain't playing. And, with all that, I'm going to end this. And I hope whatever you hear from, whether it's me or my brother or just whatever the spirit, however you do that, that it will help you, because that's what we're all about, is helping people, moving them forward, making our society, not just Kentucky, but making our society a better place. So with all that, I'm out.
Shake and bake.